They say she speaks 247. For real, it's Jackie the Model, aka Jackie Speaks, live.
What are you listening to, Scotty? What's the best radio station right now to you?
What? The Jackie Speaks Show, baby.
You know, podcast is something that's really, really trendy now. It's either people who have been doing this for years or people who are just trying to learn the do's and the don'ts and the hows and the whys. And I feel like these people here have the answers, no sway though, you know. My first question to this panel is, what are the advantages that podcasting has over traditional radio?
You're right off the top. You say what you want. I mean, depending on if you're podcasting for your own independent entity or a corporation, because corporations are now in the podcasting game, but for the most part, if you're independent, you say what you want. You don't have those terrestrial radio FCC rules. And then saying what you want is at your discretion, but also with the listeners. So if you have ratchet listeners, then you cool. But if your joints is a bunch of grandmas, then don't say fuck shit, right? Because you won't have a show for the grandmas to listen to. So like it's at your discretion. I don't want to say you can say whatever you want, but it's at your discretion. One thing.
I agree, because I hate the FCC with passion. But you do speak to your audience, and you get to break records. You get to break records that other people will go, oh, I would never do that on Hot 97. Meanwhile, they got it from your podcast. You could break records on a podcast just as you can on FM radio or Sirius or whatever.
And also, this is like not a new phenomenon for podcasts. It's just you always find that one person that has like an underground show at 3 a.m.
Right.
And that person had all the hits, and then suddenly, oh snap, the hit just made it to like another more popular show, and that person kind of gets, you know, it's that middle place where you so dope and you have great taste, and you kind of get you ahead of the curve a little too fast.
Yeah.
But that's not, you know, it's not. I'm just saying it's not exclusive to podcasting. You know, it's been like it's life.
You're right.
It's just like yeah.
Okay, come on. Well, you know, now that you say that, you kind of make me like want to jump my questions and go to this one question, because I have, even though I have a live stream, I also have a podcast, kind of, I don't know what the hell you want to call it, I have a hybrid, and it just so happens that, you know, the next person who got on, who just so happens to have a bit more followers, is now taking all of the fruit that you put into this artist. Does it make you feel like you want to throw some bows? No?
I'll let you go first.
Who would you have beef with? I can't have beef with the artist. I can't have beef with the next guy. Like we all in this. I can't have beef with these guys. We all in this together, right? Like, or supposedly, there's no reason. Like, it's just, man, I was like a little early on that. Somebody had to have Kanye on first. It's tough. That's life. Like, you know, just keep growing your thing. Like, you gotta worry about yourself. That's really what it is. Like,
Remember that little girl in the cover? Right. I agree. I wouldn't blame anybody. I'm just thinking about over time, because I've been around for like now 10 or 11 years in the industry itself. And what I've learned is, no matter who it is that you show something to, it's all about the artists themselves. If they're popping, they're popping. If they're not, they're not. It doesn't matter who you are. I can have all the connections in the world. If the artist is not popping, no one's going to pick up on it. But the reason I mentioned what I said is because I'm just looking at everything as a whole in hip-hop. When people steal beats, when people steal songs, when people steal, you know, everything, and you're like, shit, people steal podcasts too. People steal radio show ideas too. And then it gets lit, and then you do it. I paid for that trademark, I paid for that copyright. You gotta protect your shit.
How has podcasting changed over the years?
I understand. Yes. So if you don't know, well, podcasting has been around forever. Just that in hip hop culture, urban culture, it's more of a new thing. But white media's been dealing with podcasting since before iPhone 3s. You notice in the dashboard of the iPhone was an iPhone, so it's bad. You know, the dashboard had a podcast icon. I don't think we've ever paid attention to it until iPhone 5. Yeah. Right? Or maybe 6. Like 5 or 4. Right. I'm like, a podcast, what is that? You know, and you see all this dope content that you can subscribe for free. you know, it's an evolving thing in the urban side. And I feel like even for what I do with the Combat Jack show, it's still, even though we're 6 years in, it still feels like it's a new thing. Because now the audience is bigger and the new people, they're getting into the concept of alternative content outside of terrestrial radio. And now with the advent of Apple Play, which is going to be a heavy feature in 2017 vehicles. Now you have the hands-on option to listen to it in your vehicle or listen to your favorite radio station terrestrial. But now that's an option. I'm on, serious. So I think, right, instead of most more, you don't have to do that. I think that's part of the change and the content too. I think you're starting to see a lot of people from print media kind of like utilizing podcasts as a voice. It's a little weird though, in my opinion. We can talk about it later, but that's to answer your question.
You got it? All right, my next question, and I want to hear from Mouse.
Yes, ma'am.
Focus on his water.
It was so good.
What? I want you to drink it. Y'all are crazy. What makes a successful podcast today?
What makes a successful podcast? Well, I think the interesting thing, the cool thing about podcasting, right, is kind of like firstly, I should say, it's kind of like you get to curate your audience, right? So I kind of hate personally when we're in the business, we're talking about success and everybody says, well, success is subjective, right? But when it comes to podcasts, it really is. Because if you're doing it properly, you're curating it to your audience, right? And then it's so good that everybody else who is not your audience has to buy into it, right? So me personally, as somebody, like the first 2 podcasts I heard when I started listening was the Reed and the Combat Jack show, right? So it's kind of super surreal and dope to like say, hey, he came with a friend of mine, right? Because I got to listen to him and Just Blaze and Dallas Payne and Premium P. I got to hear them, right, and say, oh, okay, I love this aspect, right? Because it wasn't like the Read, right? There were 2 different podcasts, but 2 super successful podcasts, right? The Read is about gossip and hot tea and all that. That was the first time I knew what tea. That's great, right? But that no, unless I'm asking for tea. Well, unless I'm really asking for tea, I never use that word. But like that's what that is, right? But then with the Combat Jack show, I hate when people just call it it's an educational podcast. And that's what it should be deemed of, right? Because no matter who's on it, it's always about learning, it's always about educating yourself, right? So I've always been able to hear it and be like, oh, I already knew that, but then I learned some other things, right? And then everybody, now my whole age group, where it was, I'm 27, right? So everybody who's 27 wasn't really that involved and didn't really know a lot about rock and R&B. But then after every episode, now they're like, oh wow, remember you telling me about that? You know what I'm saying? So then I think once your podcast begins to educate those who already listen and then those outside and start pulling outside people, I think that's what creates a successful podcast. As well as get sponsors and ads and so that way you live in on people. But the main part is once you start to educate others and bring it outside, that's when it's a successful podcast.
Any different POVs on the panel? I agree. Yeah. And I think that sponsors come way after. Sometimes if you're lucky, they'll come fast, but as long as you have that captivated audience, you're good. Because I started off doing urban Latino radio online, live, not pre-recorded. And it was everything to me that I saw those numbers go up when I started my show. I was like, podcast, what podcast? I have to do this live. It's not the same, it's not the same. After I left that station, I learned that, fine, you can put something out a week later, you can put something out, and people build up that anticipation to listen to it because you built your audience. Right. Because you started out live, as the A came, and then they moved into podcasting. And I know if you would have just started with podcasting and not live first, it may have been different, but you still would have had the audience that you had.
I think at that time, online radio served as alternate to terrestrial radio. Most of us that project walked through certain doors, figured out that it wasn't based on sheer talent necessarily. It was more affiliation, relationships, which is cool, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But at the end of the day, if you suck, no one's gonna listen, right? Because what we used to do is just sit there looking at those numbers all the time to see it. Can't really engage.
Right, but this, right, and that's another thing too. The successful podcast, right? That's the question. I'm just trying to, so,
That was so politically correct.
you gotta, the one thing, like, we never based our show off of numbers. It was all about doing, like, we're fans of the people that we interview, first and foremost. And it was more having those conversations and learning and teaching at the same time. The numbers and everything else that made it successful was because the people embraced what we were doing. Because I felt, I'm pretty sure Conrad could say the same thing, that there was a void in that aspect, and the outlets that were present at the time, they weren't providing that energy. So I think that's that's content. As they say, content is key, right?
I go from live and then live back into podcasts. Like we do our morning show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you put it right up. So then it becomes a podcast. Like you get like a half hour. Like so, there's options there, and I also think that to add to what everybody said, that in your format, like what is the thing that keeps people coming back? What's the hook, right? Everybody knows, everybody listens to Combat Jackson because the artist, that's the hook, right? Everybody listens to XYZ, the read, why, hot tea, right? The hook, what's the hook and what's your format? Are you organized? Are you painting a picture with this hour or 30 minutes or whatever? And I think one thing that hip-hop, urban podcasting, hip-hop podcasting, black podcasting, of-color podcasting is missing is we haven't elevated to the point where we're properly planning our shows, formatting our shows, making segments for our shows. You gotta treat this like this. Just because it's not broadcast radio doesn't mean that there are things that you can't take from broadcast, like the format, like the standards, like being organized. You don't just turn your laptop on and start talking. I'm real super tired of that. I just want to be super clear. Like you're painting a picture with words. So it's your job to keep them coming back. They be like, Keish, how am I get sponsors? Son, work on your organization first. So that's what makes a successful podcast.
Actually, it's kind of like segued into my next question, which is, what are podcast sponsors looking for in order to sponsor a show?
No.